Namo Bhagavate Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Thank you so much for joining us today. We wanted to seek the blessings of Guru and Gauranga so that we can look at the subject matters of the last few days, last few chapters, which were all centered around the different spiritual masters that the Avadut Brahman had, which guided him in his life. And we thought we'd put everything into one session and go through all the different spiritual masters, in fact. So let's do that. So the first one, this was in the conversation that took place between the Avadut and Brahman and who's the king? Let me just check again. It's Kali Yuga brain. Can't even remember the king's name. No, I don't think it was Nimi, was it? Let me just see if we got it here. We're right at the beginning. Oh, King Yadu. He spoke to King Yadu. Okay, good. So the first was Mother Earth. A sober person should never be distracted from progress on his own path, because even if he's harassed by other living entities, because they are acting helplessly under the control of God. Like the mountain and the tree, he should dedicate himself to the service of others. So the earth, just like the mountain and the tree there, she's always serving everybody, in fact, all living entities. And no matter if somebody is worshipping her or walking on her, spitting on her, she'll still continue to worship, continue to serve. And the trees are the same. They will give shelter at any time. They will give fruits, depending on the type of tree, and no ask anything in return. They just serve. And that's a fantastic attitude, fantastic mood. Even when they're chopped, the trees are still useful. The wood is used. So it's really amazing. Mother Nature is so amazing. So we sober person should never be distracted from the progress of our spiritual path. Even if we are harassed by others, doesn't matter. We just carry on. Because we have to understand that others are acting according to the law of karma. We've done our karma and we're going to face the consequences. Can't avoid it. Guru Maharaj used to always say, don't cry when things happen, because you weren't crying when you were doing the things, you were doing the actions. So it's quite a very interesting way of looking at it. Second guru is air. A transcendentalist may be surrounded by innumerable material objects possessing good and bad qualities, but like the wind, he should never be entangled by them. When the wind carries different aromas, it never mixes with them. So the air is always pure. Sometimes the air carries different aromas, so we smell some things good or some things not so good. But the air or the wind is never affected by good or bad aromas. So similarly, we will have in our possession different things, some which might cause us pain, some may cause us happiness, but we should not be entangled by either. So very nice points. Third one is the sky. Through the sky, though the sky extends everywhere and everything rests within it, it does not mix with anything. The soul and the super soul have the same quality. The sky is never implicated or affected by the blowing action of the wind. In this way, the living entity, in the same way, living entity is never affected, though it may enter a body of material elements. So we're in this body, we're stuck in this body. Just like the sky extends everywhere, and it gets blown. It's never implicated by the blowing actions of the wind. So the actions of this material body, the different elements that are combined, should technically not affect the living entity, because living entities are above the material elements. So just like the sky is above the actions of the wind, not affected by if it's a thunderstorm or not, the sky is still the sky. Water. Saintly person is like water because he is free from all contamination, gentle by nature. By seeing, touching, hearing such a saintly person, the living entity is cleansed as if coming in contact with pure water. So water, we know, has so many functions: quenches our thirst, purifies us when we bathe. Water is such an amazing substance. Can be very, very pure. So similarly, the saintly person is like water. He's just by seeing the saintly person, let alone touching and hearing, one can become cleansed. This is the power of the holy man. Fire, the fifth. Even if a saintly person eats contaminated food by chance, he is not affected, like the fire that burns up contaminated substances that are offered to it. So this is a really interesting one. Saintly person, like Beam, he was given poison, but he turned into something that actually gave him strength. So eventually, anyway. So saintly person is not affected by contaminated food. Just like the fire, you can put anything in fire and it's never contaminated. It always just burns up whatever's in there. Sixth is the moon. Though the moon waxes and wanes, it is not affected by this change. The moon is still just the moon. Similarly, the living entity should not be affected by changes of the body from birth to death. We are still spirit soul. But because we identify with this spirit, the body, so closely and are attached to everything connected to the body, that's why we become morose, or we become happy, depending on the circumstance. The sun, the seventh guru, the saintly person can accept a material thing with his senses, and at the appropriate time gives that up to the proper person. So also the sun evaporates water and returns it to the earth as rain. So the sun takes the water and evaporates it, brings it back in the form of rain. Sun and the saint are never entangled by this. So the saintly person, he may have material possessions, and at the right time he'll give them away without being attached. Eighth one is the pigeon. Quite a lot was said in the Bhagavatam about the pigeon. He's an example for excessive attachment because he chooses to be captured by the hunter after seeing his wife and children so captured, thinking that without them, life was not worth living. So because he's so attached to this body, to the body of his wife and children, he sacrificed himself due to that excessive attachment. So we can be in the same boat. If we're so attached that we forget the goal of life, then we can be just like the pigeon. We can be captured and destroyed, unfortunately. The soul suffers because of excessive attachment. The ninth guru is the python. He does not make arrangements for food. He just waits for it to come to him. This exemplifies peacefulness and patience. So Jad Bharat, he behaved just like this. He would be considered like a madman, but actually he was a very self-realized soul, and he didn't make any special arrangement. He was sometimes just lie on the ground and he'll be meditating on the Lord, thinking about the Lord. Everybody else think he's mad, and he would just depend on the Supreme Lord. Of course, that's quite hard to do, but the example is that we don't necessarily need to go out of our way. We will get what is due to us. It doesn't mean we become lazy and don't do anything, but we try to serve the Lord as much as possible. Not worry too much about how, where is the Lakshmi coming from. He will send it. 10th, Guru is the sea. Just like a tranquil sea, the saintly person being full of knowledge is never disturbed. So the rivers flow into the sea or the ocean, but the sea or the ocean doesn't become turbulent. It just remains very steady. So just like the saintly person, he also gets many desires coming through his mind, but because he is like the ocean, he's fixed, he's steady, he doesn't let those thoughts and desires affect him. This one, Bhagavad Gita, is the same message is given by Lord Krishna in the 2nd chapter to Arjuna. Number 11, the moth. A foolish man is captivated by a woman's charms, just like a moth is captivated by a flame and burns within it. So the moth will go towards the fire thinking, that's nice, and get burnt to smithereens. So similarly, this might also happen to a person who is just addicted to women or men, a lady who's addicted to men. It's just like the moth going towards a fire. The honeybee, a renounced person who begs a little food from a different houses is like a madhukari, like a honeybee. Also, a honeybee takes nectar from different flowers. So intelligent human being takes the essence from different scriptures. But a saintly person should not become greedy and collect too much. So this renounced person is like the honeybee who just takes a little bit of nectar from different flowers. So person who's, especially in the renounced order, they may do madhukari, just beg food from maybe a few houses, and whatever is given, he would accept. And similarly, we can learn from many different scriptures. It doesn't have to, even the minor scriptures, it's described that one can learn lessons of life from these scriptures. Take a little bit of nectar from everywhere. 13th Guru, the elephant. A saintly person should remember how the great bull elephant is captured by the she elephant. Therefore, he should never desire to touch the body of a young girl. So this is the basic root cause of our existence in this material world, lust. And it's hard to overcome it, but we should understand that as long as we're attached to the opposite sex, we are going to remain in this world. 14, the house thief. Sannyasis and brahmacharis are entitled to take away the wealth of the laboring householders, just like a honey thief takes away the honey from the nest of the busy bees. So you see these bees that make these beehives, and then the person who owns the land there will take all the honey from them. The bees have done all the hard work, and but the person who owns it will get all the nectar. So similarly, the sannyasis, they are entitled. This is quite interesting, to take away the wealth of the laboring householders. So householders will work hard and accumulate money, and the sannyasis and the gurus will come and say, you should donate it. And this is what Guru Maharaj was pretty good at, convincing the devotees that depart with your hard-earned money. It's actually given, that authority is given in the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the verse here. This is the chapter, or one of the chapters. I think it was chapter 8 that had this these verses in it. And by doing this, they're actually purifying the householder. They're purifying the wealth. So this is very important for the householder. Number 15, the deer. They are bewildered by the sound of the hunter's horn. It sounds nice, and then it gets killed. So a renounced person should never become attracted by mundane music, like sensuous music, mundane sounds like sensuous music, especially the sweet singing and dancing of beautiful women. So Bollywood is a no-no. The fish, number 16, they're caught on a hook by their uncontrollable tongues. A learned man should control all his senses by first controlling the tongue, which is the most powerful sense of all. So the fish sees what the food is on the hook, and it goes for it, and it gets caught. And it's a really horrible, horrible experience. So if we're not careful and not controlling the tongue, then we won't be able to control the remaining senses. And the Upadeshamrit, Nectar of Instruction, first verse says exactly the same thing. It describes how one who can control the tongue, can control all the other senses, and is qualified to make disciples all over the world. Then we heard about the pastime of Pingala, number 17. There's quite a lot again described about Pingala. This prostitute gave up her plans for earning money through sex indulgence. Out of frustration, she's standing out there and nobody came all day. So she was frustrated, she gave it up. And by giving it up, she felt great satisfaction from abandoning all her material desires. And she could remember Krishna, and she became very peaceful. So sometimes we may have this situation where we're endeavoring so hard for something and it's just not coming off, and we decide, okay, you know what, enough is enough. I give up and I take shelter of the Supreme Lord. Great happiness takes place at that time because we're giving up the frustrating events, items, and taking up something which gives great satisfaction, which is serving the Lord. Number 18, the hawk, the kurara bird. When a hawk carrying some meat was attacked by larger hawks, he gave it up out of fear for his life. So renouncing and saving himself, he felt more happiness than he did when he took the meat. So similar sort of point to Pingalas, but this is perhaps a little bit more cruder in the sense that we may be attacked. Sometimes people have so much wealth and it attracts those who are envious. And sometimes people even get killed for their wealth. So it's interesting. This learning is quite interesting because it's saying you renounce, you save yourself, and you feel more happy than when you had the wealth. Number 19, the child. A foolish child is happy due to ignorance, and a saintly person is happy due to having surrendered to Krishna. So both are happy. One is in ignorance, the other is in goodness, pure goodness. So we can be like the child, innocent, and we often go to schools and we see the innocence of the children, especially when they're 8, 9, 10. And when, or even less, or older than that. And when we share the message of Krishna consciousness, they become so happy. Number 20, the young girl. Receiving some prospective bridegroom on the day when her parents were away from home, she went into the kitchen to prepare food for them. While beating rice, her bracelets jangled, and she was afraid people would think that her family was poor, because she was beating the rice, because she was doing all the work in the home. She broke all the bracelets except 2 on each arm, and these also jangled. She then removed 1 from the other arm, leaving only 1 on each arm. Thereafter, she worked in silence. So too, when people live together, many people live together, even 2 people living together, there will be clashes of interests and fighting. Better to live alone. So interesting point. We see this, right? Whenever there's a few people go together, they never agree on anything, and always disputes taking place. 21, the arrow maker. The devotee should be absorbed in the Lord service of the Lord, that he does not see duality, just as the arrow maker was so absorbed in his work of making a straight arrow that he did not notice the king passing by. So we should be really focused when we're doing bhakti, when we're doing anything, become focused and really put our attention to what we're doing. Otherwise, we're going to make a mess. 22nd guru, the snake. So we had the python, now we got the snake. He makes no home for himself, but takes over the homes of others, having eaten them. A sage should similarly make no endeavor for his own shelter. Of course, he doesn't have to eat anybody, like the snake does. But the point is that others can make the effort, and the saint, he can utilize that in the service of the Supreme Lord. This is the point. 23, the spider. God is like the spider because he creates the network of the cosmos from his own potency and withdraws it into himself. So the spider is also creates a web, and he can leave it, he can bring it back into himself, not affected by the web. So the Lord is also not affected by his creation. He creates, and then he can withdraw it as well. The wasp. He trapped a weaker insect in his hive. This insect took on the mentality of a wasp out of intense fear of the wasp, and thus became a wasp in his next life. This illustrates how one attains in the next life what one's mind is fixed upon in this life. So again, Krishna explains this very beautifully in the Srimad Bhagavatam, that whatever state of mind we leave the body, we will attain that state. And if we remember him, we will go to him. So similar sort of example about the wasp. The insect is so terrified, it's thinking about the wasp, and he becomes a wasp in his next life. So that's 24. That's all of them. And then he also learned from the body, the Avadut Brahman, also learned from the body how the body is so fickle, and at any moment it can be destroyed. It can be finished without notice. So we have to learn that we should try to remember the Lord constantly. So anytime anything happens, we are situated at the lotus feet of the Lord. So I wanted to stop there. If anybody like to share anything, Surinder, anything you'd like to share?
Yes, Prabhu, you explained the 24 gurus, the natural gurus, and very interesting. And yes, we can learn a lot. And there is one verse in Prayers of Kunti Devi. In that verse, there is a word, Gange Bogam. It means like just the river Ganges flowing to the ocean without any obstruction. So Kunti Devi is praying to Lord Sri Krishna that let all my attention be drawn unto you, and without any deviation, should not be distracted by others. I just be focused, absorbed in Krishna consciousness. Like that, Kunti Devi is praying. So we follow, and that is mentioned about the ocean, like to be like the ocean you mentioned, yes? Gurus is the ocean. And also like in Bhagavad Gita, it explains like the rivers flow into ocean, and the ocean is not overflooding or disturbed. Similarly, so many desires can come in our mind, but we should be absorbed in our Krishna consciousness and be still and peaceful, just like the ocean, not disturbed, and continue our Krishna consciousness like that. Following the footstep of Kunti Devi, we also pray about this verse is mentioned, Gange Bogam, just like the Ganges flow to the ocean without any hindrance. Our Krishna consciousness will continue without any hindrance. Jai Kunti Mata ki Jai, Jai Gurudev, Hari Guru Vaishnava Vrind ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Pramanandi Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Well done, well done. Great. Thank you for sharing that. Anything else? Anybody else? Any questions, comments? Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Gurudev ki jai.